it doesn't sort of matter where you start from. I mean, I couldn't be any further away from Hollywood. Turkey farm in the wilds of County Meath in Ireland. But and also that the journey isn't straightforward at all, and that's a really good thing, because all the mistakes that you make are the things that make you a better artist, and if you didn't have those failures along the way, you would be a really boring person.
Hello and welcome to My Hollywood Story. I'm your host, Stacey Wilson-Hunt, and my guest is the BAFTA-winning writer and Emmy-nominated Irish actor Sharon Horgan, who also is the co-creator and star of the Apple TV Plus series Bad Sisters. I've been an admirer of Sharon since her breakout UK comedy series Pulling, in which she starred and also co-created. And it's been a blast to see her career evolve as a TV auteur through such tragically comic series as Catastrophe, Divorce, and Shining Vale. Sharon, whom I'd never met before we sat down to chat, didn't disappoint with her hilarious recounting of a childhood spent on her family's turkey farm in Ireland. She also shares which American sitcom first lit her creative fuse and which she calls a glorious experience working with the late Carrie Fisher. My Hollywood Story is sponsored by Mattel Films and recorded at Neue House Hollywood. If you like what you hear, give us a follow, leave a review, and let us know what you think. Welcome, Sharon. Thank you so much for being my guest on My Hollywood Story. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am very well, and I know you've been very busy promoting Bad Sisters, the second season, Apple TV Plus. Tell me how that has felt for you. I know it's a lot, but I know you're also very grateful to share the show. So tell me about that experience.
It's been great because, like you said, you kind of it's a show we're really proud of, and the more we can sort of tell people about it, the better. But also, like, I hadn't seen some of the cast for a while, and Dervla Walsh, she's our director, she's out here filming, so we got to hang with her, and we got to hang with Camille Bender, our costume designer, and just like hang out and have dinner and have a laugh. And
so at the very least, a nice reunion.
Yeah. I mean, it's been great. We sort of played a few episodes for a few crowds, and it's nice to relive it again,
Sure, of course. And it's been a while, and that was a pandemic show.
Yeah, the first season was
right.
pandemic, yeah.
Right. Which I remember feeling like, thank God there's something cool to watch.
Yeah.
It felt like a real reprieve.
Yeah, I think it did us, it's a terrible thing to say, but it did do us a lot of favours because, there wasn't a huge amount of things being shot at that time. And I mean, it was a mare. We shut down a ton of times, and I remember one day we had to shut down because a car got COVID.
Oh, no.
The people who were delivering it had COVID, and then suddenly we had this whole thing to film in the car, and the car's got COVID. So
that's a great name for a book or a movie. The car got COVID.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's release it like a coffee table book.
Let's put a pin in that for now. Let's revisit that pitch at the end of this interview.
Okay.
But let's go back to the beginning of your story, which, if I'm not mistaken, begins in London.
It does, actually, briefly, and then Ireland. Yeah.
So you were born in London and then moved to Ireland when you were 4.
Yeah,
right?
three, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did your parents make the decision to leave London, and where did you settle in Ireland?
They left London because my parents were publicans, and they had a pub in the East End of London, right in the middle of gangster land, really. It was sort of Cray Brothers territory. And me and my sister, really young, and I think my dad was asked for an alibi for someone who'd committed a murder.
That's when you know it's time to go.
And Mum said, why don't we go to Ireland? She wanted to be around her family.
Okay.
My dad was a Kiwi, a New Zealander, and he'd sort of, broken his sort of family ties for good reasons. And but my mum was very close, big family. So we headed over to Ireland, and we sort of made a stop in a town right in the middle of Ireland called Port Arlington in County Laois, and we had another pub there called the Green Kiwi. And then my dad thought, you know what, I think I'm going to get into turkey farming. So
as one does,
a very natural transition. So then it was all of us just in the countryside, me and my 4 brothers and sisters, and yeah, completely different lifestyle. But lots of space and lots of time.
Did you have to work on the farm?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. What were your daily duties?
Well, I wouldn't say they were daily, but weekend and then holidays. Okay. All the usual sort of like mucking out. I was talking to Stephen Graham about this.
This is the
yesterday.
actor from Adolescence.
Stephen Graham, the actor and creator of co-creator of Adolescence, and he was obsessed with the plucking side of my past. And
by the way, who wouldn't be?
I know. And because I declared that, he goes like, what did you pluck? And I said, I can pluck anything. Anything with feathers, I can pluck it. It was an interesting childhood that has given me a very unusual relationship with Christmas. Yeah.
Well, we'll hopefully get to that later. Unusual relationship with Christmas. And what kind of student were you when you were younger? Were you studious? Did you love writing right away? What interested you in school?
I did love writing right away. It was English and art. How was I as a student? I don't know. I mean, not a natural student, like a bit sort of head in the clouds. My older sister, by a year and a half, proper Irish twins. She was really academic, like, maths, languages, science, all that. And that was not like, I really like struggled with all that. And so therefore I didn't love school. I found it kind of tough going.
Were you in a Catholic school?
I was in a convent school. Okay. Nuns ahoy. And
it's the stereotype I have of Ireland, but I just wanted to make sure.
It is, absolutely. You got, every morning and afternoon we would take out our Bibles and do some of that. And
were you a devout family?
My mum is,
okay, for
sure. My dad had an interesting relationship with religion. I mean, it wasn't for him. He didn't go to mass, but he was, in fact, it bothered him, the whole kind of the hypocrisy of it. Like, he'd see all these local husbands and fathers kind of go to church but then swerve it and like have a fag out the back, and he just didn't see the point, in just sort of going through the motions. So but he was sort of I wouldn't say he was spiritual, but he had his own very like strong set of moral codes and stuff. And yeah.
And did you perform as a kid?
I did. I mean, not professionally.
Right, but in school or community theater?
I mean, yes. Hilariously, the nuns were really into Gilbert and Sullivan. How funny is that? Like, someone should make a film about that.
That feels like a Stephen Daldry movie.
Well, we would put on a Gilbert and Sullivan opera every year. And so that was my first introduction, like.
And they would teach you the dances and songs?
Yeah. Nuns choreographing Gilbert and Sullivan. So it was fun, like a lot of pan stick, a lot of ridiculous costumes.
Sure.
And
they needed an outlet, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah, and so they of course went for Gilbert and Sullivan.
Of course.
But yeah, so I guess that was my first introduction to it.
And did you enjoy performing? A lot of people step on a stage and they feel for the first time, oh my God, this is where I need to be. Or that's something that takes longer for some people.
Yeah, I think I did. I mean, we did a few sort of school plays as well. And I remember someone telling me that I was good. I can't even remember who it was. And it like sort of, really staying with me because there was something about it that felt kind of right. But then I went to art college and I didn't really think about the sort of the acting thing. And then I enrolled in this sort of weekend drama school. So I was in art college during the week and doing my drama school at the weekends. And then I didn't really think about it properly until Jim Sheridan approached me in a cafe. I'd had a car accident literally the night before, and I had this like ridiculous colourful bruise.
And is this London or Dublin?
In Dublin. Yeah, while I was in art college. And so I was sitting in this cafe and I was kind of like, a dirty looking thing anyway. It was very, that was part of the look at the time, kind of grungy. He came up to me in a cafe and he asked me, he said he was making this film. And there was this part of a gypsy girl, like a wild gypsy girl. I was like, okay.
But he didn't know who you were. He didn't know that you performed.
No, I mean, I was just an art student and didn't know that I performed, nothing. But he gave me the number of his producer, Noel Pearson. And so I rang and I turned up for this casting. And I'd never done an audition before.
Wow.
I was terrible. I was terrible because I didn't know how to feel or how to behave, and certainly any kind of performance kind of went out the window.
But you had the script to work
yeah, I some pages, I think. But weirdly, when I finished that, I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. You know, I just had a really keen
Even though the
feeling.
experience wasn't perfect, you still felt drawn to it.
I felt drawn to it, or I kind of because I knew I could do better. You know what I mean? And it's that thing of like, I knew I couldn't go back. So I thought I'll, go forward and see if I can find other opportunities to fix that, It's a weird thing, but
you felt compelled to do it.
Yeah,
again.
yeah. So then I moved to London.
I'd like to say a very special thank you to Neuhaus for being the exclusive venue partner of My Hollywood Story. Neuhaus is a gorgeous private work and social space for creators, innovators, and thought leaders to connect in Los Angeles and New York. As a Neuhaus member myself, I can tell you firsthand how amazing it is to work inside such iconic, beautifully designed buildings, while also enjoying elevated hospitality and thought-provoking cultural experiences. To me, Neuhaus has completely redefined the ideal environment for creative potential and progress. To learn more and apply for membership, visit neuhaus.com. Were you always someone who people thought was funny, and did you see yourself as funny? And when did that present itself?
I was like borderline class clown. And
you were second to the class clown, number 2?
Yeah, I was second to the real genuine, like, loony, just causing chaos. I wasn't like, I didn't want to, like, I was scared of the nuns, but so I wasn't trying to disrupt things, but I was desperately trying to make my fellow students laugh.
Saying cheeky things,
but like
the girl in the back of the class with a quip.
Yeah,
right.
And also coming from a large family, it was how I kind of got my parents' attention. So I mean, I've got proper memories of doing impressions of different characters from the TV, and then doing them for my parents. And
this is a consistent theme when I do these kind of interviews. This is very common. Yes, kids trying to get their parents' attention with impressions at the dinner table.
Yeah.
Did you watch a lot of American TV growing up, or if any? What were your favorite shows?
I was just talking to my boyfriend about this the other day. There was so little TV made in Ireland, but there was these very specific imports. Like, obviously not everything made its way over, and like not a huge amount of UK TV as far as I remember, but like the big sort of soaps like the Dallases and the Dynasties,
the primetime dramas. Okay.
And then like Roseanne. That I remember just being a huge. And
in a show like Roseanne, which was so specific about a family in Illinois, working class, that resonated with you all the way in Ireland.
Hugely.
Interesting.
Yeah. And more sort of like, I more sort of realized it after the fact that there's this it was an incredible female leading character, right, and these great youngsters as well. And
Roseanne is similar to you in the sense that she based that show on her own material. So she was very much an early auteur in television. And someone like her too, so she didn't look the way that we normally saw people look. She was brash. Her comedy was not gentle.
But there was a kind of naturalism to it as well, that I felt I hadn't sort of I hadn't seen before. And then I guess there's this sort of like, Cheers and that kind of thing. But like, Mary Tyler Moore, all that, like Taxi, they were all like huge, huge shows in Ireland.
And what is a tenet of Irish humor that sets it aside from, let's say, what we would call like the Monty Python British humor or even American humor?
Oh, like self-deprecating, really kind of dark, not afraid to go to tragedy, I think self-deprecation would be the main one, like a willingness to sort of rip the piss out of yourself because someone else is going to do it. You can't take yourself too seriously or someone's going to give you a slap.
That's the Catholic school effect, right?
Yeah. But yeah, absurdity as well. You know, I think that comes through in a lot of Irish comedy and humor. You know, it's such a specific country environment with, you know, absolutely singular history that's all in our
Absolutely.
bones
And the presence of
our
religion
DNA.
and how it's intermingled.
Yes.
It's very unique.
Kind of like you have to laugh
right.
scenario.
It's a good thing to learn early on.
Yeah.
And tell me when and where you met Dennis Kelly, your soon-to-be collaborator.
I just immediately do a big smile when you mention him. When I went to London first, I was a bit sort of, you know, I think sort of spooked about, you know, I guess committing to it wholly, because if you commit to it wholly and you fail, there's no kind of going back, you know? So I was kind of doing it in this real sort of half-arsed part-time kind of, you know, enrolling in courses and, you know, part-time.
Were you sort of in denial that you were doing this for a living?
Yeah, because I mean, I had a straight-up regular job, an office job, you know. Okay. But I joined a youth theatre, youth being sort of under 26.
Okay.
And I met Dennis. There. He was, you know, acting there. He hadn't started writing, and we did The Seagull together. He was Constantine, I was Nina, and we sort of parted ways, and then we met up in a pub one night. We were both really drunk in this late night pub in Camden, and he told me that he'd written a play, and I was like floored. By this point, I'd gone back to university as a mature student. I was studying English and creative writing, so I was like, I think I want to do that as well. And anyway, he was going off to travel around the world for like 6 months or 8 months or something. But he gave me the play before he went, and so we started like writing to each other. This is before, like, you know, people would just
longer correspondence.
Yeah, and I was like, oh my God, you've written a play and it looks like a play and it sounds like a play. Let's put it on. So that was like my first producing role, you know, where I sort of raised money and
curated the content.
Yeah, and we put on the play. I cast myself in it, and
which makes sense.
Yeah, yes. And then we just we loved making each other laugh. Like we absolutely found the same things funny, and we were both, you know, ambitious, but also easily sort of sidetracked, and so we slowly started writing together in between trips to the pub, and we wrote sketches, and we wrote sitcoms on spec, and we were like, it makes my heart kind of,
it's a happy time.
Well, yeah, but it was also like we had so much, you know, we had ambition and we had like so many ideas, but we had no clue how to get them seen or made.
So that's my next question is, what is the climate at that point in terms of submitting your work? You know, did you have people helping you? Are you pitching cold to BBC? How does this work?
Well, we did it absolutely the wrong way, and we just went out and bought a load of gusseted envelopes and put our scripts in and just sent them out to all the production companies who made the shows that we loved. And like 90% of them said we don't accept unsolicited material. Sure. And but we sent it to the BBC, which is, you know, I mean, at the time and still is an amazing place to, you know, to sort of, for new writers, new
especially
performers.
Comedy.
Absolutely. You had this incredible route where you could go, you know, you start in radio and you start on these sort of small sketch shows. And
like Armando Iannucci had a very similar path.
Yeah, it was amazing. So we actually, at the time, there was like a new comedy department, and we submitted our sitcom about the Irish famine. And
what was that called, by the way?
It was called The Good Blight.
Okay. How did that perform?
Well, you know what? I mean, it was pretty terrible, but it was absurd. It was an absurdist thing, and it makes sense to me now why we did it, because, you know, we were making comedy about the darkest time in Ireland's history, and And weirdly, they read it and they said, this is one of the most barking mad things we've ever read. But
that's a compliment, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you want to submit stuff for this? They were doing this competition for new writers, and so we did, and then we won that new comedy competition, and that's when we started getting agents and that kind of thing, and getting like small jobs, writing for other people's shows. And I then started getting acting work,
So the acting was concurrent with the writing jobs. Okay.
Yeah. It all kind of happened around the same time. But I mean, I was doing a lot more acting than writing, but the small bits of writing I was doing was the thing that landed our first sitcom.
So this was pulling.
That was pulling.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know the term pulling in this context, please explain.
Well, it's basically, I mean, it's picking someone up.
Okay.
For a casual one night date.
Sure.
It usually involves going out on the town and,
like how people spend their 20s.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So it was really, yes, it was about that, but it also was completely not about that. It was about, in fact, it was, Dennis and I were writing on this sketch show called Monkey Dust, which I really, really recommend.
I think I tried to find it and I couldn't track down.
Really,
Yeah, I need to keep looking.
Amazing animated sketch show, and a lot of writers came up on that, and great voice actors as well. And so Dennis and I were writing for that, and the producer of Monkey Dust, Harry Thompson, he had the title Pulling, and he loved our writing, and he said, I think you should write about, young women out trying to get laid. And we were like, we too like the title. We don't want to write about, young women out getting laid. But what we'd like to write about is our misspent 20s. And, Dennis and I were both late starters and people who were living in London, kind of waiting to, the equivalent of the American dream kind of thing, like sort of waiting for our big opportunity, but working these jobs we had no interest in, living in shared accommodation and having unsuccessful relationships. So we were like, we want to write about that.
That's a perfect opportunity to tell stories.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a scene I love from Pulling, I believe season 2, but correct me if I'm wrong. Donna has her kebab stolen from her hand.
Yeah.
And I think she reflects on the experience by saying, I'm not depressed, I've just lost my faith in humanity. And I've keep thinking about that sentiment. And for me, first of all, it's brilliantly written, but it also captures what I think is your sense of humor so perfectly, is that you're not a pessimist, but you also just don't have faith in others that they're going to do good. Does that feel like an encapsulation of your general sense?
Well, yeah, but it's very much, I think, an encapsulation of Dennis's as well. That's like, my God, that's his story.
That scene is brilliant. The look on her face, she's had a tough night. She's standing outside, kind of like drunk and eating, as we do. And just paralysis and grief when this guy steals her kebab. I think we all relate.
Yeah. It's my dad's, it was my dad's favorite scene of anything I've ever done.
Really?
Ever, yeah.
Oh,
but it's really interesting how we started writing, I think, because to me that sounds like something that could come out of like, Curb Your Enthusiasm or Seinfeld or something. Mm-hmm. I don't think I hadn't watched those shows at the time, but the story that action kickstarted was much more about the relationship between Donna and Carl, and them sort of, him turning up for her, him finding that guy who stole her kebab and giving him a kick up the arse. Right. It was this incredible learning experience, writing for that many characters, but connecting all the stories. And we'd never written anything long form.
It's one thing
narrative.
to write for yourself and the two of you, it's quite another to have different storylines and how are they intermingled. Right.
And also to be very, very focused on it being funny. That was huge for us. It was, we knew there was stuff that we wanted to talk about, and we wanted to put these characters through the ringer. We wanted to like.
Well, that's why it's relatable too.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Right. Things go wrong in a big way for like all of them, but but we knew we wanted it to be really funny as well.
Well, that show, was it two seasons, 3 seasons?
It was 2 seasons and a special.
Okay. I feel like it became very iconic.
Yeah.
For only really having aired 2 seasons. It's quite extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, it should have had 3 seasons, but the controller of the channel at the time was just like, I don't know. It was all about, like, he had to fulfill so many. It was all about the right demographic for that channel, and we were, seen as a sort of a women's show, which is ridiculous because it was, women were the main characters, but it was, very unspecific, to the stories.
Well, and probably a lot of the comedy branding at that time was still very male centered. I'm assuming.
It absolutely was. Okay. Yeah, we were kicked out for like a 5th season of a show about a misanthropic drug dealer who lived in a tower block kind of thing. But so we didn't get our 3rd season, but we did get to finish the show with a special, and we kind of threw everything at that. Like, that was an amazing.
You had at least a finale on your terms.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
And another show that I love that you made, Dead Boss.
Oh yeah.
Again, also only limited run of 1 season, I believe. Yeah. But I have to ask you, you got to work with Jennifer Saunders.
Yeah.
Who plays essentially, you say prison governor, but we would say prison warden, essentially. Yeah. And your character, Helen, has been sent to prison for killing her boss, and she says that she hasn't killed her boss. But I have to ask, what was it like working with Jennifer, and were you an Ab Fab fan?
I mean, not just an Ab Fab fan. I was an obsessive French and Saunders fan. Along with Roseanne, they were probably like the biggest influence on me because I just saw. Well, first of all, they were the funniest. They weren't just the funniest women on TV. They were just the funniest people on TV. Yeah.
Regardless of gender.
Regardless of gender. And they made it look like so much fun. And it was so infectious. I thought, I want to do that. Yeah. So funny, so fun, and just brilliant actors as well, brilliant character actors. I think they're both geniuses. And when she agreed to play this character in Dead Boss, we literally couldn't believe our luck. and Dead Boss didn't work out. It got cancelled after 1 season. But it was interesting because it was a complete departure from pulling in that sort of social realism kind of thing. It was absolutely absurdist.
Very much.
And really trying to do something fun and different. And I'm really glad we did it. But it's one of those things that kind of knocked my confidence a bit. Oh. Because, I mean, that's fine. It's good to have your confidence knocked, otherwise you just turn into a cocky
In your Irish, you cannot be cocky.
Oh yeah, Jesus. Don't do that.
How did you bounce back from that? And, obviously it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but to your point, were you sort of knocked down a peg in terms of, this is too hard. I don't want to keep doing this.
No, like the opposite, like better make the next thing very good.
Right.
Because after Pulling, Pulling was our first sitcom, but it was BAFTA nominated both seasons. It was won comedy awards. It was, so for us, it was like this huge success. And I think if I'd gone on to have another great success right off the back, I may have that would have been my downfall, I think, whereas it didn't. I couldn't sort of get anything made, and I was coming over here and making pilots. And so, everyone kept telling me this is the dream, you're making pilots. And I'd be like, no one gets to see them. Right. You do all that work and no one gets to see them because, for the most part, they don't get picked up. It took a long time before I got something.
Were there pilots in England? In terms of, were shows order a pilot and then you get the full season?
Yeah, often we didn't have to with Pulling or Dead Boss, but often that is the case. But it's less of a thing, like the making of the pilot over here was just. I just found it a very bizarre kind of.
It's a strange sadistic ritual. Every spring, people gather, make all these pilots, although much less so now.
Yes, much less so now, which is a really, really positive thing. Yeah. But everyone's sort of doing it at the same time, so everyone's going after the same people and locations, and it's like a game.
And then 80% of them we never see.
It's literally Hunger Games, and so nothing was really getting made. And then I had this opportunity to make Dead Boss, and then that didn't really work, and. So it just made me really double down on like basically the next thing I make has to be something I love. Because it wasn't that I didn't love Dead Boss or love the pilots I was making, but they weren't, they weren't like Pulling was in my gut.
He wasn't a relatable character.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
At least as far as I know. I don't know your whole backstory.
No, not at all. Was a ridiculous human. But so yeah, I kind
maybe
of
something more personal.
That was it. So I got the opportunity to do another network deal, to do another pilot, and I turned it down. And I remember at the time it being a very nerve-wracking thing to do, because that was my bread and butter really, and my family's bread and butter. And but I just thought, no, I need to hold out for something that feels right. And then Rob Delaney dropped me a tweet.
Well, I was just going to say the tweet that changed your life.
Yeah.
This episode of My Hollywood Story is brought to you by the Starz drama series Outlander. Katrina Balfe and Sam Heughan star in the romantic fantasy epic and long-running fan phenomenon. Outlander, for your Emmy consideration for Outstanding Drama Series, and streaming now on the Starz app. When you finally connected with Rob and he just essentially said, I think you're great, I'd love to work with you, what was it that you think unified you, as not only as people, but as artists, as writers? What was their connective tissue? Did it feel like what you had felt with Dennis? And how did it feel different, et cetera?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was completely different, because when I met Dennis, we were two single people with nothing, and nothing to lose. And with Rob, what connected us was our families, and our experiences of being married people. And
so you're both married with kids at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, it was that. It was that we hadn't sort of, outside of a few unique exceptions, we hadn't sort of seen marriage portrayed in a way that felt relatable and genuine and real, because we both knew how hard it was.
Sure.
And felt that we had something to say about that. Not really how hard marriage was in particular, but how hard it is to sort of stay in love when you have kids and responsibilities and, mortgages and that kind of thing. So that's what we wanted to write about. We just kind of, the route we took to get there was the thing that kind of had to be honed, and this idea of them sort of meeting in this 6-night stand and
I love that it's 6 nights. It's not 2, it's not 4. It was 6 solid
I mean,
nights.
we wanted it to be an appropriate amount of time where you could, for these two people to really impact on each other. And if they had both lived in that country, they would have continued seeing each other.
Right. But they seem like a couple by the end of the episode. They're holding hands. They seem like they've been dating for a long time.
Completely. But sometimes that happens, right? Sometimes you have such a unique connection with someone that, you're sort of, your body tells you that you're in a relationship, because it becomes so comfortable, so quick. You're like, oh, are we married? We must be married, or we wouldn't be.
I mean, they can be disgusting with each other. They can be completely without vanity.
We had like a 2-minute sort of montage to sort of establish those 6 nights. And they are running into toilets and having sex, but they are sitting reading the papers together on a Sunday, and just like
they've been married 30 years.
Exactly. Right. And yeah, that goodbye they have before he goes back to America, before he gets the phone call that's going to change his life, was one of the most romantic things we'd ever written,
And Rob had really never acted on TV before. He was what we would call a Twitter comedian back then.
Oh, but like a stand-up comedian, and his background is very like lots of musical theatre, I mean, he'd properly trained, but he just hadn't done that kind of, TV acting.
Right.
Yeah.
And how did you guys write the show? And were you physically in the same room when you were writing? Would he take a pass, send you scripts, you would take a pass? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, that's what we did. Okay. We wrote the pilot together. It took a little while to become the writing experience that it ended up being, because it ended up being one of the, easiest, fruitful experiences I've ever had. But when you start out, it's awkward and you're all elbows and you're like, say something and then you blush because you're like, that wasn't funny. He doesn't want to work with me anymore. And but he was having the same experience as me, you know. So it took a little while to sort of find our style and find our.
Well, he'd probably never done something like this before either.
No, exactly. And it was different to how I worked with Dennis, because I'd, you know, at that point made, you know, a good few sitcoms and all these pilots. So I had a huge amount of experience, and I'd sort of found my way of working that I thought worked. So he was great. He sort of slotted into my sort of method, and it became very, very easy very quickly.
And did you ever have any moments where you disagreed with each other that you had to navigate?
He sort of after the fact would tell me that, because we started out, so we wrote the pilot together, and then when we got the series commissioned, he was in LA and I was in London, so I would write during my sort of London day, and then at the end of the day I would send him what I'd written, and then he would start his LA day, and then I would wake up the next morning and read his pages. And so he told me later that when I would send an email sort of saying what I thought worked and didn't work, it was like he wanted to pick up the laptop and throw it at the wall. He was
waking up to this deluge of notes from you.
Yeah, and that it was very annoying. And but when you're in person, you just you know, because you've got someone's face there and they're smiling at you, and and you're working out things together, and so it's much harder to get like a load of notes that are,
and it feels impersonal too.
Exactly. Right. So we sort of navigated that thing of like, you know, the writing separately and sending it back and forth, and then eventually got to be in the same room together. I moved over to LA to sort of rewrite them all together, and that's when we really started enjoying it, because we both knew when it got good, we both knew it, and we felt, you know, we had a confidence in it, and it felt like the voice was kind of unique, but also very romantic. You know, we wanted it to be a rom-com, but to have all these sort of.
You have the most natural chemistry of any two people I've ever seen in a show. Honestly, it's as if you've known each other your whole life. Yeah. Is that how it felt when you first met in person?
Yeah. It was. Well, no, not when we first met in person. I mean, because we're both awkward, you know, and he's like super tall, and you know, I felt really stiff around him and small, and you know, it took a while for us to sort of, you know, to work out our thing, but we knew once we'd done the pilot that we had this sort of special chemistry, and in fact when we would send scripts into Channel 4 and Amazon, and they would come back with notes about, you know, these two people just seem like they hate each other. We're like, it's
just
fine.
Keep watching.
Just let us do our thing, and you'll see, like, because the characters love each other, but they also really make each other laugh. And it was a handy thing to have worked out, because I'm a terrible corpser, you know. I laugh in the middle of scenes, whereas because we allowed our characters to laugh at each other, it took the sort of sitcom thing away from it, you know, where normally sitcom characters say something funny and then the wife goes rolls her eyes. Whereas we were like, you know, enjoying our characters were enjoying each other's sense of humor, so
which is why they were attracted to each other in the first place. When they're at the bar and he's trying to buy her a drink and he makes her laugh. That's it. That was sealed the deal. And I can't talk about Catastrophe without bringing up the amazing Carrie Fisher, who obviously we all lost during that time, and you lost a special person. What did you learn from her, not only as an actor, but also just as one of the funniest people who's ever lived?
Oh, God. I mean, everything, really. It was such a glorious experience that I still can't believe actually happened, you know. Because she's such an icon, and when she walked into our crappy little location with our terrible craft services, and you know, she must have been like, what the hell am I getting myself in? I mean, I couldn't believe that she said yes even. But over the course of the 3 seasons that she was a part of, we got really close, and I think you know, she was very open about her experiences within the industry and, you know, how brutal it can be, you know, if you're a forthright woman who speaks her mind and calls things out.
Yes.
And
she kind of created the blueprint for that.
yeah, absolutely. But she was also very like, you know, like I remember her saying to me that, you know, whatever happens, just, you know, put your family first. Like, don't, like, keep an eye on that, the personal side of things. Don't like, don't
Nothing's worth losing that.
Exactly. Don't run away with yourself, kind of thing. Because at the time it was just, you know, it was a huge thing for Rob and I to suddenly have this show that people loved, and, you know, being at the Emmys and all that kind of thing.
Was it hard to navigate fame with your family's obviously top of mind too?
It was just like, it's always difficult. It's difficult if you have to travel for your work, and it's difficult when, you know, things start changing and your time is used up, and you know, there's a whole host of difficulties that come along with that. But I think it was also just how she, you know, there was a lot that she was definitely angry about, you know. And also she was someone who absolutely loved acting and wanted to be doing it more, and you know, found that difficult, that it wasn't, you know, that straightforward and easy for her. But there is definitely a thing of like the endurance of it, and, you know, keeping going. And also, I mean, she was a powerhouse of a writer as well.
Amazing.
I mean,
she really took hold of her own story, which
Yeah.
I really appreciated. Her books were amazing.
Yeah.
She wrote so many essays. I think she was so good at making sure we knew her point of view.
yes.
And she had come from a showbiz family, so she had seen her parents struggle.
Yeah.
So that was so inspiring to see her just say, whatever happens to me, you've heard it from me first.
Yeah, exactly. And she was blunt, and she was honest, and I mean, they're just incredible traits to learn and to have.
Absolutely. And it's amazing to watch her daughter celebrate her life and really be a role model unto herself. And last question about Catastrophe, would you ever explore a reboot with Rob? Now that we are in the age of reboots where shows never die, they just keep getting resurrected over and over
again. Funny,
again.
Isn't it? It's like,
but in this case, I actually would be very excited about this.
oh, well, I mean, we had a little reunion. I mean, it was a couple of years ago now, where we did this BBC radio show where you talk about your show, and it was Rob and I sort of reliving it, and we were both as we were talking about it, got quite emotional, you know, because it was such an incredible. It was just such an incredible experience, and very unique. And the problem is that we didn't really get to enjoy it at the time, you know, because it was successful. They commissioned a second season so quickly, and then we were on to that.
There wasn't that breathing room to enjoy.
There was none. I mean, we may have grabbed like one burger of celebration together, like that was it. We were just sort of moving from one thing to the next, and but, you know, that aside, it was an incredible experience, and I think it's just, we got very lucky in that we got to write this ending that allows people to, you know, decide what happened to those characters. And I remember watching the last episode go out, and I didn't really do that often, and I kind of thought, I'm going to watch the last episode go out because I want to say goodbye to it, and I was just gearing up to feel incredibly sad.
How did it feel watching it?
It was weird because what happened was, and this is when Twitter was a lovely place to be,
Right.
and so people were sort of, you know, tweeting about it as it went out, and when it got to the ending, this thing sort of exploded, and suddenly it was just. Suddenly, all I felt was joy, because I was like, this is just going to stick around.
So
it's
4 years of work sort of culminated in that moment.
But also because we'd left it kind of open and, you know, a little ominous maybe, or, you know.
They were pretty far out there in the ocean. It was a little ominous.
Bad currents. But you know, we realised that it was going to, or I realised in that moment that I didn't sort of have to be sad, because it was always going to be there, you know.
I love it. And it's just there anytime we want to watch it. Like if I need a laugh, it's right there. And now on to another one of my favorite shows, HBO's Divorce. Aired in 2016, and you had 3 wonderful seasons. And this cast, I mean, truly remarkable. Sarah Jessica Parker, Thomas Hayden Church, Molly Shannon, Tracy Letts, and Talia Balsam. Really just an amazing ensemble. And I was curious, for you as the creator, what interested you about divorce as an inciting incident? Because this is what we see from the beginning of the episode to the end. Their relationship is essentially over in that 30-minute period. What interested you about exploring this as this sea change in these people's lives that you hadn't seen before in other shows?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure exactly why, but I remember Amy at HBO saying it quite succinctly, which was, anyone who's ever been married or in a long-term relationship knows what it feels like to want to get divorced. So I knew that there would be a sort of something for everyone, and the divorce sort of watching a sort of, I guess with Catastrophe it was about the beginning of a relationship, you know. And obviously divorce is about the end of a relationship, but it's so complicated, and it's so, like, I guess, you know, part way through the journey, the people involved ask themselves, you know, is this worth it? Should we have just like stuck it out? So that thing of, like, you know, the kind of push and pull of that, and what it does to two people, but also it was the whole industry of divorce that I was really interested in, you know, and how, I mean, that was a lot of what my sort of research was about, was how it can destroy two people, and how two people can set out just to want to part. Right. And then once the industry of it gets involved, the mediators and the lawyers and the all of that, it becomes this thing that just sort of
and
destroys
people have best intentions of a peaceful parting.
Exactly,
right.
Exactly.
So sad. It really is very sad.
But, you know, I mean, when we first started talking about it, there was no, I mean, for me, there was no idea. I just met with Sarah Jessica, and she wanted to write about, a woman who was having an affair, and within a marriage, and, you know, what she wanted to explore and what I ended up writing were, I mean, there was, you know, a lot of crossover, but the divorce side of it felt like, you know, it kind of gave it the sort of the housing and the structure that it needed. And yeah, I mean, I love that show. I wasn't really involved past the first season, you know, but I love the experience.
Me too. I love the setting too.
Yeah, I mean, the setting, it was beautiful. Jesse Peretz did such a beautiful job of directing it, and Reed Morano DP the first episode. And so that's, I mean, it has this sort of like ice storm kind of look to it, and it was just wonderful to sort of, in that first episode, through Molly Shannon and Tracy Letts' relationship, to just show the worst, like how bad it can get.
Those two
when you hate each other.
Yes.
And you know, Frances's realization that, like, that could be them, and like, let's get out now.
And were you a Sex and the City fan?
Huge.
I assume as much, but just wanted to ask.
I still am. I still watch old Sex and the City episodes.
Had you met Sarah Jessica before this?
No, not at all. It was set up as a blind date by HBO. Like, I was developing something completely different with them, that weirdly ended up being Shining Vale with Courtney Cox on Stars. Like, that was the idea that I pitched, and they were like, "This is great. We love it. We'll do it." But Sarah Jessica's looking for, you know, a writer.
And what struck you about Sarah Jessica that surprised you, if anything?
Just an incredible work ethic. You know, an incredible professional, someone who really likes to split the atom on everything she does, and, you know, and her, you know, desire and need for it to be really good. You know, I mean,
she's very precise.
And like, would push us all the time to go for it, because, like she was saying, there's just so much good TV out there now, and we need to, you know, this needs to be special. So we would have these Sunday sort of script get-togethers where, you know, you'd eat breakfast, but really you'd sort of drill down into them and work out what was working and what wasn't. And so, yeah, just a sort of striving for excellence, you know.
Well, you achieved it. I absolutely love that show.
Oh, thank you.
It's very beautiful and very sad and very relatable. And I'd love to talk about a movie in which you just appear as an actor. You didn't have to write it. You didn't have to direct it. You just showed up, which is The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
Yeah.
Starring opposite Nick Cage. This movie is a trip for those who haven't watched it. Very meta on a lot of levels. But I wanted to know how it feels for you when you do just get to be an actor and you get to just show up and you don't have to worry about the scripts. You don't have to worry about producing.
Yeah.
How does it feel to free yourself of those confines and just be Sharon the actor?
I think I'm just a completely different person.
Really?
Yeah.
In what way? More relaxed?
Just like having fun and like, you know, just like one of the gang sort of sitting around and
She's just on the cruise sheet.
and it's so different from making my own stuff where I never stop for a second. And, you know, as much as I love it, it's, you don't really get to, you don't really get to enjoy the moment as much because you're constantly sort of troubleshooting and you know, rewriting and, you know, you're sort of still casting along the way and still
you're
trying
the
to
boss
find,
of hundreds
yeah,
of people too.
yeah,
It's
and so
stressful.
it's a huge responsibility, and but then you go and do something like, you know, a game night or a Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, and you're just like, this is just a laugh.
You're like, now I get why people are just actors. This is fun.
Now it's slightly different because, you know, with Merman and everything, we're producing so much stuff that, like, in between takes, I'm usually working on something else. But like with those films, it was just
What did you enjoy about working with Nick?
Just watching him. Just I mean, I've said this I think a few times, but when we did the table read, it was because it was sort of in that middle bit of lockdown.
Right.
You know, actually we locked down in Budapest while we were there again, and it was
Another tricky production.
A bit of a nightmare. But when we did our table read, it was on Zoom, and he had already learned the entire script. He was doing a full performance, and also he was wearing pink leather, and it was amazing. And it was like Pedro Pascal as well.
It's a great cast.
Incredible cast, and yeah, he in the middle of it all, when things just, you know, when you're at the start of something, it's very exciting, and then in the middle of it, you're just doing your job, and I thought, no, I need to, like, you know, I've watched this actor for years, and he's like made some of my favorite films of all time. So I just started, when I would finish filming, just go home and be watching his films.
So what are your favorites? I have 3 favorites. I want to know what yours are.
Adaptation.
Same.
Raising Arizona.
Same.
And I Moonstruck, I think.
3
Same?
for 3, although Valley Girl is a close.
Oh, I haven't seen Valley Girl.
Oh, Sharon.
Oh, okay.
LA
just
in the
gonna
early
write it on my
80s.
hat.
Oh,
Really?
Nick Cage is the most Nick Cage you've ever seen.
Okay,
You must
great.
watch Valley Girl.
Because, you know, when I'm in LA, I really like to watch LA things.
Okay,
so,
that's
yeah.
the most consummate LA story you'll ever
Okay.
see. It was a huge cult hit. You will love
Okay,
it. You'll
wow.
absolutely love it. But the rest, 3 for 3, I knew we
Yeah.
both had great taste. So you mentioned Shining Vale, which was a very special show that aired on Stars. And I know that you are a huge Friends fan. And in
Huge.
fact, I've heard
Still
you say
am.
you still watch it daily or almost every day, if you have time.
Well, I mean, not every day, but I watch it all the time.
If you have
Yeah.
a chance.
Yeah.
How did you feel knowing that Courtney wanted to throw her name in the ring to play the lead in this show?
Just like thrilled, and it just suddenly elevated the whole thing, you know. She's so brilliant in this show.
She's a lot like Sarah Jessica.
Yeah,
They're very
yeah,
similar work
really
ethic.
precise. You know, like an incredible brain that is, you know, scattershot, but it's sort of she's such a perfectionist as well. I mean, she is so prepped when she comes to set, you know, and she really got it. Like, the thing is she knew exactly what, and I think when we sent it to her, it was like one episode kind of thing. And she was like, okay, I sort of am this person. So
she seems to inhabit it very easily.
Doesn't
this
she?
character, yes, absolutely.
I mean, she's so rock and roll in it.
She is.
And like, you know, you sort of want to be her, even though she's like having this mental breakdown.
Or you're not sure if she's totally losing her mind, if she's a genius or both.
That's it. And you know, it's such a hybrid, it's such a crossover. And there was always that sort of worry that, you know, when you pair comedy up with horror, it can become this sort of neither one thing balance. Or the other. Mm-hmm. But we knew we wanted proper scare jumps and we wanted proper hard laughs. And I mean, she's so great at horror.
Well, she does have Scream and Friends.
Exactly. And I mean, she can really deliver a joke, but she just totally got under the skin of this character.
The scene where she's riding upstairs in the attic and
yeah.
then her husband interrupts her,
yeah.
played wonderfully by Greg Kinnear. I have to imagine that was maybe pulled from real life, where the dutiful woman author is at home trying to work. Yes. And maybe she's getting interrupted too many times.
Exactly.
Was that something that happened to you?
Yeah,
before?
But also incredibly inspired by The Shining, which, you know, as all those great iconic horrors kind of made their way in there in some way or another. And Jeff Astroff, who was the, you know, co-creator and showrunner, was obsessed with that whole genre. But I was just with Courtney and Greg last night, and it was like the most gorgeous thing that they've, you know, they're friends, like they
good people,
love each other. And I mean, yeah, I wish more people had seen it.
It's very good.
It's a really, really good piece of work.
But it's a big swing, like you said, genre, mix of genre, and also some very difficult subjects: mental illness, sobriety, infidelity.
Yeah, and generational trauma, and you know, it's kind of hard to know who to sort of pitch that to.
Right.
But you know, as an experience, I mean, Dervla Walsh directed the pilot as well. She's our Bad Sisters director, and it's an extraordinary looking show as well.
It's very beautiful.
But it's getting a second life. It's getting that second life thing on HBO Max, and that's amazing when that happens. You know, suddenly
again,
people
nothing ever really dies.
I know.
They just get shifted around in the universe, and that is a good thing about the streaming era. We can always find, for the most part, there are a few UK shows I couldn't find, but they're floating out there
somewhere.
And then, of course, Bad Sisters,
the
show you've been talking about for 100 years.
Yes.
But we will find something new to talk about. But firstly, congratulations to you. Two seasons on Apple TV+. And before we talk about the actual show, I do want to ask about the opening titles.
Yes.
PJ Harvey covering Leonard Cohen. How did this come to be? Was this a track that already existed, or did you commission her to do this song?
I mean, a lot of what goes into these shows is such a joint, you know, it's a really collaborative. But I can proudly say that was my idea.
Brilliant. So how did that request get to PJ?
I just, you know, did the thing that you do in this industry, which is, you know, wrote her a love letter. And it was a genuine love letter because I'd been such a huge fan of her entire career. And the Leonard Cohen song was just, you know, it was just perfect for the show. I mean, it was like it was written for the show.
It almost, if you didn't know better, you would think it was.
I know. Yeah. And so, I just wrote to her, and then we did a Zoom, and Tim Phillips was already on board as our composer. Tim Phillips, he composed the
gorgeous
soundtrack
music
for Shining Vale as well. They just won the BAFTA for the second season of Bad Sisters.
Yeah, it's very cool.
So we already had Tim, and so and Polly knew my work, like, thankfully.
I was just going to ask, she had to have already been a fan of yours.
She was. It was amazing. I was so thrilled. And
that must have been very surreal to be Zooming with PJ Harvey.
It was wild. It was so wild. But this is an amazing job for, like, that kind of thing happens. And, you know, it's always pinch yourself. And it has to be. Otherwise, you know, you're dead inside.
Right. You can't wake up and think today, oh, I have a Zoom with PJ Harvey.
Yeah, I know. So we had sent her, I think we just sort of sent her some mood boards and some sort of, you know, things that sort of captured the visual, and we'd sent her, I think, the first script, and at that point, I think we'd started filming a little bit and sent her a few scenes.
So she was able to see a little bit.
Yeah, okay. And she really loved it. And the weirdest thing, so I had these references, because Bad Sisters, it's, it's a thriller and a drama, but it's got this whole sort of unique sort of tone of its own. So I was like, I want there to be, I love the idea of it having a very sweet female a choral element, and I referenced like Bulgarian choir music. And then I said an Appalachian, like folk music, like murder ballads. And she had this folder of what she called them her orphans, songs that she'd sort of written over the years. And it was just the weirdest thing. I mean, I already knew that she wrote about women and sort of murderous thoughts and about water and about, all of that. Deep stuff, and so that was all sort of connected to Bad Sisters as well, because we have so much sort of water imagery and visuals. That's and so she, in her little folder called Orphans, had these songs that, like, it was the weirdest thing. She had also been doing Bulgarian choir singing as a course.
Oh my God.
And a lot of these songs had that sort of murder ballad Appalachian kind of feel. And so it was literally like it was meant to be.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And we didn't have a huge amount of time with her on the first season. So what Tim did was, like, they recorded obviously the Leonard Cohen, and then did sort of one day of just like everything, every kind of like lines of poetry and sort of odd sort of grabbed lyrics and prose, and sort of got her to sing a huge bunch of that, and then loads of noises, loads of like whoops and screams, and he created this thing called the polytron, and then he would sort of use that and pepper it throughout. And then we'd more time with her in the second season, and that's why we got to do more covers and but yeah, it was a ride, an amazing experience.
It's almost like creating a whole show into itself, just to do the titles.
Yeah.
And of course your collaborators are Brett and Dave, who oddly but wonderfully also made New Girl,
which my girls watch, which on a loop.
Has become a giant hit. It's almost like what Friends was about 10 years ago for millennials and Gen Z. Now New Girl is that show.
It's on in my house every week.
It is brilliant. And is it true that you use the foundation of a Belgian series as the concept? Okay.
Yes.
And then by season 2 of Bad Sisters, you've expanded beyond.
Yes.
Okay. So tell me about season 2. Had a big swing narrative decision and a major death. I'm not going to say who. How scared were you to then expand beyond the structure of season 1 and begin to tell what is essentially a new story?
Yeah, it's a new story, but it's really connected to the first season.
Yeah.
It's everything that happens in the second season is a fallout of the pricks' actions. Towards Grace and towards the sisters in the first season. And that was really important, because I didn't want it to be like a sort of whoops, we've done it again kind of thing. It had to have been connected. And, this woman had suffered the worst possible trauma. But she'd also sort of, if you're a victim of domestic abuse, it's not something you go shouting about. So she'd sort of isolated herself for all these years, and she'd sort of become used to that kind of way of thinking. So even though, she'd come out of it and she's like back in the family and they've essentially kind of saved her, that doesn't go away. That's sort of shame. And
it'd be very strange if suddenly she had this new life and
everything
was fine.
And just like sort of, it took a while for me to decide to do it again. So we did this kind of test writer's room where we're trying to figure out if there was a story there. And I'd had this vague story that I'd actually, I think, told Brett about when we were on set, but of, the idea of lightning striking twice, but that not being such an odd thing, because when you've been a victim of that level of abuse, and you're this fragile sort of raw nerve of a person, and that's sort of what attracts fellow abuse again.
Sure.
And
your whole neurology is disrupted.
Yeah, exactly.
And you cannot trust instincts. You can't trust your first impressions of people and experiences.
Exactly. And a lot of the research I did and stuff I was listening to was sort of like of the sort of Dirty John kind of variety, and and those guys kind of find their victims at, therapy centers, or, they're absolutely targeted. And so the idea was that, she meets someone else, and if it goes wrong, because she's so accustomed to holding in that, to isolating herself and holding in that shame, that she would never be able to tell the very people who could help her. So then we sort of, the idea of like finding out what really happened, that's what sets the sisters on that journey. It's kind of why we had to have that big swing, really, because, showing how the worst possible case scenario, I think, was important, because a lot of these stories don't have a happy ending.
No, they don't.
And then, but what happened then was realizing that what we would need over the season is a sort of decoy baddie, because, the reveal that it's sort of Ian, and that he's, a former cop, and, just sort of blowing up all of that, had to come at the end. So the idea of Angelica, another, broken person, really, being the one that the sisters kind of focus on, was just.
Well, she's like the ultimate red herring, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because she's loud and she's annoying,
and she's a bigot, and she's in a lot of ways an awful person.
She's not pleasant,
but she's also, and because of Fiona Shaw as well, because she adds so many layers to it and so much depth. You have feelings for her. You know that all she wants is to love and be loved, but she's her own worst enemy. And, she's, she kind of latched onto Grace because they were kind of, sort of broken souls together. And then it's just too much,
Right.
There was a huge amount of work that had to be done to make it seem so sort of seamless. And,
I can tell. It's not an easy show to assemble, but
yeah.
It's very beautifully made, and your co-stars are just wonderful.
They're great, aren't they?
Congrats for assembling this in amazing ensemble.
Thank you.
And just looking ahead, what are you looking forward to making with HBO? What new stories are you looking to tell?
I had such an amazing experience there. Just like, they really believe in the artists getting to, do what they want to do, really. They're very encouraging of just letting you kind of go for it. And like, Amy Gravitt came and found me in London in 2007 or something like that. She'd seen Pulling, and she was trying to get Pulling on HBO. And
she's great at recruiting.
Oh, she's amazing. And so I was developing with her for years, before that sort of Shining Veil, Sarah Jessica thing. And then so being back there, getting to be back there is a wonderful thing. They make the best TV in the world. So
can't argue with White Lotus and The Last of Us, etc.
Yeah, and Succession, right. And everything. So yeah, my what I'm working on at the moment for them is kind of, I'm going back to my roots of Half Hour. I'm going back to that sort of divorce catastrophe style of storytelling, and it's a little autobiographical, but only in the way that it sort of kickstarts an idea.
You're in a different place in your life now than you were.
Completely, and I have a lot to say about it. And coming out of a divorce myself, and sort of being back in that sort of in that world, but also that feeling of like being in your 50s and sort of and everything having just really high stakes, everything you do, every move you make,
right.
And how that sort of affects someone, and how they make those sort of decisions on life and love,
Very relatable again.
Yeah.
And for men too.
But also very specifically to us, is the the sandwich generation thing, where we are the first generation who has, aging parents who often need help, and then young adult children who aren't, don't really have the resources to be out in the world, but also, sometimes kind of can't be because of,
right.
All sorts of reasons, mental health and financial, and so you're having to, when you get to that point in your life where you're like, this can be about me now, it's not.
Suddenly it's not, and then you're caretaking two different generations of people. It's a very difficult time, but fraught with laughs. And to wrap today, I ask my guests a couple of closing questions. The first being, what do you hope listeners of My Hollywood Story, your Hollywood story, take away from what they've heard?
Well, just how, it doesn't sort of matter where you start from. I couldn't be any further away from Hollywood. Turkey farm in the wilds of County Meath in Ireland, but and also that the journey isn't straightforward at all, and that's a really good thing, because all the mistakes that you make are the things that make you a better artist, and if you didn't have those failures along the way, you would be a really boring person.
And then in closing, what have you learned about yourself in sharing your story today?
That I'm still excited about talking, about it all. I still like get really giddy about it, and I still, I get all the feels when I talk about Pulling and Catastrophe and those shows. They were all such unique experiences, but you don't really think about them. But when you delve into it again, you realize how they're still with you. It's still in your blood and your DNA. Like, they really made a huge impact on me and a huge impression, and it's nice to feel that
and to not forget what you accomplished.
Never forget.
Never forget. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your story. You are so inspiring and a joy to be around. My Hollywood Story is a production of Hippolyta Films and Entertainment. It is produced by me, Stacey Wilson Hunt, along with Sonia Slutsky and Wendy Green. Series producers also include Daryl Young and Janet Grayson. Our sound mixer is Luke Tierney, with camera by Ramiro Cantu. My Hollywood Story is edited by Nathaniel Wixon, with original music by Madi Gabriel and Jenny Carr of Moon and Star. Our logo design is by Brad Mitchell, and I'd like to give a special thanks to Champion Turf. My Hollywood Story is sponsored by Mattel Films and recorded at Neue House Hollywood. If you like what you hear, give us a follow, leave a review, and let us know what you think.